Yes. Focus. All right, I'm going to do a couple of questions before we get set up here. How many of you folks have ever attempted to open a lock without a key? Wow, it's like half the room. All right, so a lot of you may not need a primer in lockpicking, but there's always little details that we might not have missed because lockpicking is, and manipulating locks is a kind of a self-taught thing. So people learn on their own, and other people may not have picked up something you picked up or the other way around. So they're going to cover like a lot of little things that you may not have ever picked up on, and if you've never opened a lock without a key before, you're going to learn a whole lot more. So now we have all kinds of audio and video, and this one's already working. Good. Are we good?
Yeah, we're good.
All right.
All right. Who's ready to have fun? So I'm going to start by introducing myself.
You want to introduce yourselves, or you can probably pronounce your own names better than me. Lockpicking, a primer.
So this is a 3-hour panel/intro. We will be taking a break at about an hour and a half. That's a little bit different than what the schedule says, but bear with us. This format is going to allow us to cover quite a bit of material in a short period of time and really engage a lot of you, so I think it's going to be fun. My name is Doug Farr. I'm president of LockSport International. We are similar to the group Tool, which many members are sitting up here with me. We are around almost as long as they have been. We kind of do the same stuff that they do, but we'll touch on more of that later. So
you just look damn sexy. You're doing it, don't you?
Oh, thank you. That's how I've been getting our membership base up. Promising never mind.
Jay Gore.
Hi, I'm Jay Gore. I run the Longhorn Lockpicking Club in Austin, Texas. We were founded in fall 2006, so coming up on 8 years now. I think we were one of the first, if not the first, LockSport International major chapters, sort of the flagship chapter, and now we're sort of autonomous. We kind of run our own group now. We operate out of the University of Texas at Austin.
I'm Jos Weijers. I'm from the Netherlands. I'm a member of Tool NL. That's the original Tool. Starting of this year, I'm the vice president of that group.
Ray?
Hi, I'm Ray. I'm from the Sportsfreunde der Sperrtechnik. It's German's LockSport group. I think the oldest LockSport group in the world, founded 1997, and doing lockpicking for 20 years now.
Sportsfreunde der Sperrtechnik.
Yeah, it means sports friends of lockpicking, basically, in English.
There we go. I'm Babak Javadi. I'm with the Open Organization of Lockpickers in the U.S. I was one of the co-founding board members for the current form of the organization that started back in 2006. Although we've had a number of additions and departures since then. Deviant, you want to?
Sure. I'm Deviant. You may have seen me around. I'm also on the board of Tool. And yeah, I just kind of love talking about this. I love that every hope for a long time, it's been one of the first places that a lot of people saw lockpicking in the US. And consistently every time after that, they've had really good lockpicking talks. I think most of the people on this stage right now have been up here before in one form or another. But I don't think we've ever done this before, where we kind of, we told them, we said, hey, if you want a lockpick thing, we could do that, but like, isn't intro like kind of old and busted? And they're like, no, everyone wants to learn. We're like, all right, we'll do an intro, but what if we mixed it in with other cultural LockSport topics, and we took a lot more time for Q&A, and I think that's going to be really rewarding for at least us, hopefully you too. So yeah, we're going to kind of kick it off here and go with, we're going to see how this rolls.
I think before we begin, I wanted to recognize something interesting that I just remembered and realized here. So
what's that?
Modern LockSport as it exists in the United States today was kind of born here at Hope. I don't know if everyone has realized that before, but the original the first Tool chapter, before Tool was a big organization in the US, was started by a group of people in northern New Jersey, Eric Michaud and Mouse and a couple of others from the Princeton group. And they had been meeting for some time before 2006, but in 2006, at Hope actually was when the current form of Tool in the US was actually formally started. That was when we created the first board of directors for Tool. And so this is a really special experience for a lot of us, because this is kind of where it all started for us. This is where it started for me. Hope was my first hacker conference. It was the first time that we started Tool formally, and it's really a pleasure and an honor to be back here again now here in 2014 talking about where we are today.
That's actually an interesting question, because as well, H2K was my first real HackerCon. Can we get a show of hands? How many people is this like your first experience with a HackerCon? Or was Hope your first one ever? Any of the Hopes? Wow, that's like half the room. That's awesome. So yeah.
And, on that note, how many newcomers do we have here? Show of hands, please.
That's a lot of hands.
Good amount. That's a good amount.
It's a really cool mix. Awesome. As long as we, what is Jason Scott's? As long as we can always have the 4-star lobby and the 1-star rooms, we'll keep coming back to the Hotel Penn. So let's kind of groove through this, right? There's this intro that we like to do at some of our events, and it captures the reason people are really fascinated by locks. Even if you're not a lock picker, a lot of people love locks. They love old locks, especially. People have lock collections. Some people even just have collections of keys. So locks as a device resonate with us culturally and hold a real special place in a lot of people's hearts. And people have a hard time explaining. If you ask them, you say, why do you like this thing? You don't collect antiques. And they go, I don't know, I really like this little, I'm gonna make it into a little decoration or a token of jewelry. So locks and lock picking, it's not just about subverting security, although that's what a lot of us do professionally in other careers. Like, something just about locks is very fundamental to how we see ourselves, to how we see our culture, to how we see privacy and space. And all of this was captured pretty well in a story that a friend of ours, Skylar, used to tell. He probably still tells it if you ever see him talk. He's a very fun presenter. And Skylar says, I want you to imagine a situation where you're going to meet someone and you're supposed to be there, right? This could either be, let's say you're gonna get a new place to live. You're gonna go see someone's new apartment that's for rent. Or maybe you're a student. You're gonna go see a professor during office hours, or you're gonna just go visit friends. Like, yeah, come on over after work. I'll be there at 5:30. So you go to meet somebody, and you're supposed to be there, and it's their space. But what do you encounter? You encounter a door. And if the door is open, right, like the door is just hanging open, most of you would probably not have a real problem walking through it. At least sticking yourself a little, like you stick your head in, you're like, hey, are you here? You know, I'm here, I got here. Because again, it's an open door. So it signifies something, but it doesn't signify as much of a barrier to us culturally. Now, what if that door is shut? I bet you'd behave a little differently. Now again, we talked about this. This is either the unoccupied apartment or the professor who's supposed to be in his or her office. So you probably would knock first. I mean, culturally, that's what we learned to do as little kids. You might knock. But if it's like a door that has no lock on it, it's just, you might kind of open it. You might do that thing again where hey, are you out here? You know. What if the door were shut, however, and there was a lock? What would you do then? You know, it starts immediately. You're feeling something different about that door. Whether or not it's even locked. Whether or not, just because there's a lock in that door, the door means something different to you. You might take your phone out. You might, before you try to go, you might, hey, are you here? I got here before you, Because just because that lock is there, it means something. And even if, let's say it's that apartment rental, the landlord's like, oh yeah, I'm in traffic, but there's a little rock under a garden gnome. You can get the key and go in. Some of you might do that, and some of you might be like, I'll wait for you. Because again, the lock represents something to us about space and privacy and demarking our lives. And then the really neat concluding example is, what if the door were open, but it has a lock? Now, at this point, it doesn't really matter what you personally would do, whether you'd step in or stay out or call somebody or knock or shout. I bet you that door, even though it's literally hanging open, it means something different to you than this door did that didn't have a lock in it at all. And that's part of what locks do to us, and that's part of how we like to think of them. And they're fascinating devices. We treat them as puzzles in LockSport. They're not something to be seen as just this barrier of space. They're something to be explored. As, you know, that's kind of with the hacker ethos, right? I mean, some things demark and barrier out, and we see them as things to be tinkered with. So we love to run games, we love to run contests, we have whole conferences based around this. If you get to learn lockpicking, we encourage you to try your hand at any of the games. We have some here, we have some other events. A friend of ours, Shane, who really regrets he couldn't make it, he always loves hope, but you know, this is him winning like a ninja badge at DEF CON. So try your hand at contests. Some of them are fun, some of them get really serious. We'll talk a little bit later about the competitive world of LockSport and what you see coming, people from around the world coming, the best people head to head. But that's what we're about. That's what LockSport is. It's a fun, entertaining, and hobbyist, unprofessional, perhaps non-professional way to interact with these devices that mean so very much to all of us. And if you've never picked a lock before, I think Doug and some of his people are gonna get into that. That's an empty cup, sir. I gotta fix you up.
Yes, please. So yeah, I mean, I just want to point out that our community is mostly all-inclusive, and this is mostly about community. So you know, whether it be security organizations or clubs in your area, or lockpicking or hardware hacking, ultimately you're part of a community, and we're trying to make that community as easy and open to as many members as possible. You know, people ask us, what about, or I mean, not from this crowd, but people have asked us, you know, what differentiates you from a criminal? What differentiates you from someone that's going to break into my house that poses a threat to me? So think about that question. I'm going to answer it later, but there's quite a few differences. So I'm going to come stand on the podium. Just
Sure. Can
so
you
it's
see
a little
the notes
easier.
and everything?
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
So, test. Intro to lockpicking. Let's start. First thing, most important part is we do have rules, and the rules add legitimacy to our organizations and protect our members from getting into places that they shouldn't be and situations that they shouldn't be. So the first rule is do not pick locks which you do not own. That means your dorm room, you do not own that lock. Someone else owns that lock. That includes your apartment complex. I can't stress this enough. Locks are mechanical, they're prone to failure, and if you break a lock that you rely on especially, or which you do not own, there could be a price to pay in terms of damaged property. And along with that, do not pick locks upon which you rely. So your house lock, your car lock, padlocks that are in use. Again, mechanical devices that will break down and fail, especially when you're sticking foreign tools into a space meant for a specific shape and size. Insert your sexual innuendo there. Lockpicking is easy. If you come up to the village, I promise you, we will have you opening locks within the hour. There's some things that we're going to cover that are going to make it more easy, but again, there should be a very low barrier to entry here, and that's something that we pride ourselves on. We allow people that are interested in the security community to come into conferences and spaces like these and participate in a way that they wouldn't be able to if they didn't have the experience in the computer security realm. So it's a great way to get your foot in the door. Pin tumbler locks are the majority of the locks that we're dealing with. They've been around for about a century. We're talking about 90% of the locks that you see on a daily basis. So all the locks pictured here, young and old, are pin tumbler locks. And we're going to go over the mechanism of action pin tumbler locks. So some quick verbiage here. The lock itself, or the lock housing, it can also be called the cylinder, is the whole object on the screen. The plug is the yellow piece. We have the keyway in which the key fits into, the wards that prevent only specific types of keys from entering the lock. We have the key pin, which is, we'll talk more about later, but that's that red pin. If you look into the face of a lock, into the opening of a lock, you'll see a key pin is the first pin there. So if I were to take a cross section, cut off the front of the lock, what I would see is, again, our plug, our key pin is our red pin. It makes contact with the key. Our blue pin is our driver pin. So you might ask, why don't we call these bottom and top pins? And that's because in other countries, specifically in the European region, the lock is actually mounted in the 180 degrees. So in that regard, we call them key and driver pins. The entire stack is called a pin stack. If I were to attempt to open the lock with for instance, a tension wrench or a screwdriver, what would happen is I would have binding. I would have binding at the driver pin here. The point in which the plug meets the lock housing right here is called the shear line. So I would say the shear line is not free to move and the lock is unopenable or locked. Put the correct key in, the pin raises to the shear line, the driver pin sits above the shear line, and the lock opens. Pretty standard. So most locks have several pin stacks. In this particular picture, we have 5 pin stacks. That's most of the residential housing in the US has a lock, a quick set, a Schlage, a cylinder that's very low security. It has 5 pin stacks in general. So we have locks with as little as 3 and as many as 8. Different levels of complexity, obviously. So insert the correct key, all the key pins raised to the correct height, the driver pins sit above the shear line, and the lock can open. The cuts on the keys themselves is called the bitting. When the correct bit is cut into the key, obviously we have the shear line here. In the second position on the key, the driver pin is now sitting below the shear line because while every single pin stack is correctly at the correct position, the second one is not. This is an example of that specific bit cut too high. Again, we're binding now at the key pin instead of the driver pin. In a perfect world, if we had very, very precise manufacturing processes, and the reason why we can pick and manipulate locks open with tools that may or may not resemble a key is due to the manufacturing deficiencies in the manufacturing process. So, while the assembly line is fairly accurate, for instance, the drill bit used to jig the hole might be a little dull on this run and a little less dull on this run. So, in a perfect world, if I were to draw a line down the center of the plug here, this is the plug removed from the lock, the yellow piece here, and now we're looking down onto it. What I would see in a perfect world was there would be no difference in if I were to draw a line down the center, all of the holes would align perfectly with that imaginary line that I just drew. Now, in the real world, we can see a close-up this lock. This plug was taken out of a lock that was in very short use, but you can see very close up, there's material missing from some of the routed holes there. And they all have slightly different characteristics. So again, this is what allows us to manipulate locks open. If we look at the pins themselves, you can see there's some issues here with this pin, material missing there. So we're dealing with a material that's very soft in general. Brass is what a lot of locks are made out of. It's not the only material, but brass in particular is soft and can deform over time and can deform through heat and obviously during the manufacturing process. So again, all of these characteristics add to our ability to manipulate locks. So if in this example, I draw a line down the center of the plug there, what I would see is maybe the second pin stack, or that is the fourth pin stack. The hole here has a delta between that imaginary line, the most. There's a largest delta between the center and the and that hole. So what happens is the cylinder, excuse me, the plug will while it's turning will bind at a specific pin, and usually it's only a single pin. So what happens is we put our pick in, we feel around into the lock, we find the specific pin stack that is the most difficult to move, that has the most pressure, that has the most binding pressure from the lock, will make more sense in a bit, and we move that particular pin up to the point where it picks, and we move on to the next one. So for instance, if I had a tension wrench inside the lock, I'm applying tension, and I move that specific pin that's binding up, what you'll see is the lock will turn maybe a little bit, maybe 1/10 of a degree, something very minute but noticeable, and then we'll move on to the next pin. So that process in general, kind of the essence of lockpicking is being able to identify the binding pin, picking the binding pin, and then knowing that you've picked the binding pin. And this may be something that you can actually use all of your senses for. You can use sight. You may hear a clicking. Like I said, you might see the lock rotate 1/10 of a degree. So that's really the essence of the lockpicking process. And obviously there's quite a bit more to learn, but with this basic knowledge set, you should be able to open most locks that you see on a daily basis, and that's not an understatement. So.
Do we want to put our money where our mouth is and switch?
Absolutely, yeah. Let's stop listening to me talk for a minute. Let's get some demonstrations here.
By all means. So we'll have Babak and I. You've got a microphone. You can talk this through a little better here.
All right. So while Dave here tries to pick this lock, you'll notice that we've got a couple tools here. These are all tools from our current pick set that we have down the Lockpick Village, but already open. All right, so I can just stop talking, I guess. No, you're going to keep going? Okay, good. So what's the most important thing with lockpicking, as many of you probably already know, is to find the right tensioner, to find the right turning tool. What you really want is a turning tool that really bites into the keyway. So for example...
Open!
Yeah, you got a cock and balls.
Open! No one noticed that you picked a lock.
So what you want is you want the thickest turning tool that actually fits in the keyway, so the less slop there is, the better feedback you get from the lock cylinder. And what that allows you to do, what Dave is doing here, is as he's applying very light pressure, very light turning pressure to the plug, he's able to feel, both in the turning tool and in the pick tool, how those pins inside the lock are behaving. So you can feel when a pin is dragging more, you can feel the grittiness of the pin, you can feel the grinding, you can feel when there's more tension or pressure against certain other pins.
Yeah, you'll see in a minute on the slides as Doug keeps talking what I'm representing here. Just really light pressure. This bad. No.
So a very common question is, well, that's great, light pressure. What the hell does that mean? Can you quantify that? Can you give me anything actionable, anything useful? Imagine pressing a key on a modern laptop keyboard, on a membrane keyboard. You don't require a lot of pressure to actually depress that key. That's about as much pressure you're going to be using when picking a lock, which is not very intuitive. If you apply more, what happens is the pins begin binding up more than they otherwise would, and it'll be very difficult to overcome that friction. So if you apply too much pressure, it's very difficult to pick the lock. And if you don't apply enough pressure, then you have a situation where you can't feel the binding pins. So very, very light pressure is really the key here.
Doug, tell them about what happens if they push too far.
If you push too far, hilarious. If you apply too much tension, what's going to happen is you're going to overset a pin. In this particular slide, what you're going to see is the key pin going up too high, basically going up into the cylinder or into this part of the lock, which is called the Bible. Let's wait for that animation. There we go. And it's going to get stuck, and that's oversetting or overlifting a pin in the pin stack. It may be hard to realize that you're doing that at first. Like, obviously you're not going to be looking at the side of the lock when you're picking it. I think it was Josh Neckreb from Lockpicking 101 said once, lockpicking is like solving puzzles in the dark. So there's a lot of visual representation going on. It's not a sight-full-based activity. So if that does happen, what we're going to do is we're going to release tension on the lock, we're going to reset the lock, and then we're going to start over. I like to tell beginners in particular, if you haven't picked the lock within 20, 30, 40 seconds, you should probably reset the lock and start over.
If it's an easier lock. I mean, not every lock is going to open in 20, 30, 40 seconds.
For beginners. For me, at least.
This is why I
I
love
can
the
open
idea
it.
of this panel,
I can
because
open
our
it in
whole
20
deal was
seconds.
like sniping at each other on shit we disagree on. Just like some of us are just every time you say the word tension, I'm like dying.
Oh,
Those of us who are sticklers, tension is attractive force, and like
Uh,
it's turning
torque.
pressure,
Torque.
turning tool.
Okay, we'll use torque from now on to make Deviant
Even that
happy.
sounds too bad.
But for you guys that want to come on down to Lockpick Village later and try, don't use that 30-second benchmark as a oh no, I can't open it in 30 seconds. I'm terrible.
Well,
If one of our
oftentimes,
staff doesn't open the lock in 30 seconds, you can like throw those little black rockets at us.
well, there's other things you can blame on the lock if it's not opening in 30 seconds. So you'll learn to do that as well. Where was
Sage
I?
advice: if it doesn't open in 30 seconds, blame the lock.
What was the name of the book that
That's how
by
he's
Mark
made it this
Tobias?
far.
Oh yeah, Tobias's book was open in 30 seconds. So
Told you,
yeah,
right.
that's the standard, right?
Anyways.
Other tools we got.
Other tools, let's keep going. So there's another method of opening locks called the raking method. Not something we generally teach, but it is kind of a brute force method of opening a lock and more of a random method.
It can have technique. It's not all random.
Yeah, I teach this all the time. It's way easier.
I don't teach it.
The
If you
thing-
want to learn how to pick locks, you're going to do it the right way, or you're not going to do it at all.
So yeah, as you can see, well, the reason there's the controversy here. So rake tools are usually their working head is longer, and they touch multiple pin stacks simultaneously. That's kind of a feature of raking. So it doesn't lend itself to a deliberate finesse process of I'm touching this pin. What do I feel under this pin? It's literally just scrub, 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 and open. And for all of the freaking like nerdy people in the room, someone who saw it once, they saw like lifting, and it's we're picking, it took a while, and then they saw raking, and they were like, we're blowing through everything. Like I was raking some of those earlier, and they're like, oh, so raking is more powerful. And I said, no, not more powerful, just more seductive. So it is
raping,
like, yeah.
raping.
No.
That's what it
my
looks like.
analogy is
Not good.
a rake it's basically like an automatic transmission, and a lifting pick, a hooking pick, it's like a stick shift. This is another good show of hands question for this room, because it's not like your usual crowd of people in this country anymore. How many people can drive a stick shift in this room? There you go. So if you learned to drive a car and you learned on a stick shift, we got the camera? Oh well. If you learned on a stick shift, you can always get behind the wheel of an automatic. If like your buddy's drunk at a party and you gotta drive it home. But if you learned on an automatic and then you get behind the wheel of someone's car and you're like, why are there 3 pedals? Like, it kind of screws you up. So we encourage, as Doug would say, we encourage people to try the finesse technique and to learn good pick discipline first with lifting. Then, like Bobak and I, we own a pen testing company. Like, how many times do we start with raking? All of them.
Always. All of the times.
Because I want to get in the door before the guard comes around the corner.
Right. And so if
Same
you...
with competition. Everybody will start off.
Of course, absolutely. Even in our championships at at LockCon and at other events, everyone starts with raking. A couple swipes with raking first.
He's like shaking his head.
The thing is, though, if you
Hold
waste the
on,
time,
hold on.
if you
While
waste your
he's
time
talking,
raking,
I'm going to
that's-
talk over Doug right now. Jagor, tell me, how far did raking get me in the competition at LockCon last year?
So last year you did pretty good.
I did pretty good.
Sixth in the world, I think.
In our competition. Obviously, not everyone in the world would come to our competition.
That gets
but
an applause right there,
we
honestly.
did. So the reason I bring that up is because will raking get you into every lock? No. But if you understand enough about how locks work and how they respond, you can learn how to use a brute force technique and add your own kind of finesse into it. So you can learn very quickly if a lock is going to respond to raking or not. And so it looks very random. If you look at someone who is not very experienced and someone who is very experienced, and you look at what they're doing when they're raking, it looks identical. But for the person who's actually doing the picking, it feels very different. I can tell, and after the competition, Jagor actually asked me, he's like, Bobak, what the fuck? Like, raking, I've always just thought is silly. How is it that, what are you doing? How is it that it's working? And for me, I can say that whenever I'm raking a lock, I can actually feel the lock it feels different. It begins to respond differently, and I can tell that I'm getting somewhere. And that's something that you gain with experience. So if you just start learning with only raking, then yeah, you're not necessarily learning a whole lot about how the lock is going to respond. But if you combine the techniques, you can become very, very proficient at opening locks quickly.
I don't know. I don't know what's up with the camera, but oh well.
No, it's 2 cycles.
Oh, it's two. Oh, see, there we go.
You got to turn it off and on again.
Yeah. Hello, IT.
There we go.
You want to try to rake that one?
Yeah. So we'll try this blue master lock here really quick.
While you guys are
grab a
attempting
tool.
to
Yeah,
scrub
yeah.
the lock open, let me ask Jagor another question. When you won first place at DEF CON and had a all-inclusive paid trip to the Netherlands to compete, what was your method of opening the lock?
So historically, I've been sort of a purist. You can rake a lock open, but I consider it a dishonorable victory. So my pick set is just full of short hooks here. I focus almost exclusively on single pin picking. So that's what I did for the US Championship.
And we're proud of you for it.
I think the real point there was that if you get good enough, you get your trips paid for to come compete in the Netherlands.
Yeah. Well, like, who wants a free trip to Amsterdam and then a train ride to Snake? Get good at picking.
Especially the train ride to Snake.
Yeah. All right. So half diamonds.
What was that?
Half diamonds and stuff.
It's been an hour and a half.
No.
Halftime?
Half diamonds.
Half diamond, sorry. I'm saying halftime. I'm like, this isn't the Super Bowl. Not like we'd be watching it anyways.
It's better.
So several different tools. We've talked about these already, but let's just put them into context. This is our short hook or our what do you call the short hook?
Short hook.
A hook.
Feelers?
A what?
Just a hook.
A hook? Okay.
In between the long hook and the gonzo.
Or feeler. That's what I was getting at. Feeler.
Sure. Hook, feeler. Everyone has
Feeler,
different names
finger
for them.
pick.
That's
We're
whatever.
getting as central
Yeah,
as
I
we
gave a
can
whole
here.
talk just about pick terminology at DerbyCon, and if you speak Spanish, I gave a talk at Echo Party. The videos are online. There's like 1 billion terms for all the picks that are out there, and half of them are describing the same pick.
All right. So anyways, you'll hear many different terms for the same stuff, and don't let it overwhelm you. Again, oops. This is obviously the hook-like pick, so that's all you need to remember. We have the half diamond. The notable characteristic of the half diamond is it's a straight pick all the way from the base of the pick to the end of the pick, and that we'll talk about why that's important later. And then we have our rake, and again, like Deviant said, there's about 1 million different types of rake styles, but anything that doesn't look like these two, you can just call a rake. There are some ridiculous names, double, triple snowman. Anyone have any good names?
Queen picks.
King and queen picks? Okay. So anyone can come up with a pick design and, name it something ridiculous.
So we're going to show you some different rakes here.
Nobody with a C or Snake.
So, for example, here's,
Stuff you should throw away.
Why don't you go through the names here?
So yeah, I mean the classic triple hump or Fogota, because it's not quite a Bogota like this one. You have the dual hump Savannah, P-knuckle, another P-knuckle. It's interesting that all of us have moved to the really severe raking profile compared with, like, this is, the long jag, the L rake, or the old-fashioned, like the one on the slides that you saw earlier, the sort of just the C rake or S rake or snake, or yeah, here we got one here. So that was, like how many people, again, show your hands if you have a pick kit that ever had this pick in it. Like it came with every pick set along with that stupid single ball. But now, like almost all the rake profiles have moved to this Raimundo style, very severe humped tool that originally started out with his Bogota set and has been knocked off and copied any number of times over.
Can someone tell me what those severe or very deep cuts, what that resembles?
You're asking them or us?
I don't mean.
Are you talking about this?
Anyone
pick
who
here?
understands what I'm talking
You're not
about,
making boobs as a
please
joke or something,
answer.
right?
No, it
Yeah.
resembles a bump key, right?
Yeah, kind of.
We have very deep cuts, so just a note.
But yeah, I mean, just all of those and more. There's tons of raking tools out there, and their whole idea is to get a lot of pins moving with a lot of randomness as much as you can, as fast as you can. But this is a fun thing that doesn't involve rakes.
Right, so our half diamond, the characteristic I was talking about earlier is we can put it in the cylinder, we can put it in the cylinder what we would think of as upside down, and we can raise it up as high as we can so the springs are completely retracted. And when we slowly pull the pick out of the lock, what's going to happen is we're going to hear the pins slamming down. If there's 5 pins, you're going to hear slam, 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 slam. And that gives you an idea not only how many pins are in the lock, but it also helps you visually represent how close the pins are to each other and how close the tolerances are in that regard. So very useful. Very before you get to the point where you're just looking at a lock and you know every single characteristic about it just by looking at it, this is a good learning exercise. So several people have mentioned this already, but one of the most important tools is your turning tool. Someone said, I don't recall who, but someone said that picking is 90% tension and 10% tool selection and usage. So what that means is, the tension is very, very important. When I pick, and I know a lot of people do this as well, they put the lock in the palm of their hand, the keyway facing either direction, it doesn't matter, but the palm goes in the palm of your hand. The tension wrench goes to the bottom or top of the keyway, and the index finger completely extended is used to, that was a trip. Sorry. The index finger is used to apply tension to the lock. So that is the way you should be replicating as well. If you look at your finger and there's blood leaving the tip,
Yeah, like that.
I mean, you're not only are you going to wear out your hand, your hand is going to start to hurt. That's too much tension. You're applying too much tension. The lock's going to have a very hard time opening. So save yourself by being gentle. This is really important. And oftentimes what happens is people will go at this very seriously. They'll start picking for the first time and they'll...
That's not a staged photo, too.
This is what they look like.
Those people.
Right, okay. Anyways, so the point that I'm trying to make is oftentimes you'll give up hope very quickly. No pun intended, but you'll give up and you'll start just messing with the lock subconsciously. You'll engage in a conversation with your neighbor. You'll start thinking of something else. You'll turn on the TV and the lock will fall open in your hands and you'll be like, what did I just do? The first time you do open a lock, you do kind of feel like God. It's really cool. All these doors literally will open in front of your eyes once you know how to pick locks. I mean, it's really a powerful tool if used in the right manner. So I'm going to let Steve talk about this particular slide.
Yeah, so like happy kittens, right? Of course. I'm a cat owner. My cats are at a friend's house because I'm moving, but yeah, so obviously when you get a lock open, we haven't actually been respecting this enough up here, but it's like, open, you gotta say open, or if you're Ray, you say offen. And then all the Dutch guys go, grr, German, beat me. So yeah, like, that's the big thing in this culture is the idea of like open. We wanna hear it when you get locks open in the village. We'll try to say it more up here. It looks like we're showing off, but that's the idea. What would prevent this from working? What would prevent a lock from opening? Well, there are pick-resistant locks. So seeing what you have, how many of you, again, I love the hands because I love the audience. Mechanically, did that diagram make sense? Like it's clear, you understand those imperfections, you understand how they bind and why they happen? Well, if lockpicking, essentially lockpicking is an inversion of the normal way you interact with a lock, right? Normally, you push the pins with the key, then you turn. It's push, then turn. Lockpicking is just turn, then push. So it's a very simple process, and you did a beautiful explanation of it. Well, what could interfere with that process? What could interfere with the idea of picking? Pick-resistant pins are an easy way that manufacturers can stop this sort of mechanical action of turn first. If you have a pin that's not a pure cylinder, if it's in this case spool shaped, like a little spool of thread, this is called a spool pin. The idea would be turning pressure causes that lip to kick over. It causes that lip to splay out to the side, and then if you try to turn and then lift, that spool pin isn't actually going to let you lift correctly. Now, that doesn't mean it's impossible, right?
Well, it just makes it more challenging eventually, right? The lock manufacturers use these, they don't use them widespread because it is more expensive, obviously, to manufacture these more precise, pins in general, but once you understand how they operate, it really just adds another piece to the puzzle, and it makes it more exciting and more fun, and you get to keep moving on once you've mastered the basic pin tumbler lock. So these aren't something to be afraid of. There's something to embrace and conquer, and learn the different intricacies of the pins themselves. And so I wanted to say something earlier. Well, I don't remember. Continue.
Okay. So the idea, when people first see this diagram, they say, wow, so it jams it up and you can't get by it, can you? Well, let's look at it a little more closely. And I'm just going to imagine what's happening over my shoulder because of presenter mode. But when the pin is jammed up, when the plug is turned and the spool is caught on a lip, you have the contact points between the driver pin, that blue pin, and the key pin in red. They're very splayed apart. If you push a little harder underneath on that pin, the mechanical action, what the pins want to do is kind of bring that gap back to true a little bit. So the two black lines that show some rotational position here, you can see it gets kicked over, it gets jammed up, and then if you push a little harder underneath the spool pin that's binding, you can get the plug to actually back rotate just a hair. And that will, occlude that gap shut, and then you can kind of pop around the spool. Now, a few things are going to happen there. One, you need even less pressure on that turning tool. And we got into some of the analogies. I love your analogy. Bob explains the turning pressure. Normally, think of like a keyboard, like a membrane keyboard, a laptop keyboard, less pressure than you need on that key. Think of if the turning tool were flat, just stacking some coins on it, that's enough pressure. Even less pressure than that is what you're doing if you're trying to get past a spool. Extra pressure underneath, which we told you earlier, you might overlift, you might jam up. But all of that, the most frustrating thing is that back rotation can cause pins you had set to then unset in other chambers. So spools are quite the frustration all around, but it is absolutely possible to get by them. It's possible to probe for them to find out where they might be. A lot of times you'll hear people, if you pass them, hey man, this lock's a real pain in the ass. There's a spool in chamber 3, people will talk to each other about that, but getting around them,
That's an example of the kind of information you would only get picking pin by pin. Mm-hmm. So you're not going to be able to tell which pin chamber has a spool if you're just raking. You might be able to tell their spools, but you won't be able to tell where they are.
You're not helping your argument. Sorry.
So there's a lot of pick-resistant pins. There's a lot of interesting designs. A mushroom pin, the idea is if you make the pick-resistant pin with sides that will drag more along the plug wall, this will create longer periods of friction. Obviously, what's the disadvantage here? Well, that pin is not reversible. Spool pins, a giant machining operation can load them into a hopper. And as the lock plugs are coming along and the housing's coming along an assembly line, a machine can just feed them down. Something like a mushroom pin, this is something a locksmith is ordering and he or she is pinning by hand, and they're actually orienting things correctly. Serrated pins, I don't know how well this shows up on the screen for y'all in the back, but just pins that have grooves down the entire thing. There was a famous lockpicker and locksmith named Jerry Finch. He worked with Lab and other companies later on. He was a huge advocate for spool pins. And in the latest proof of concept, or get the fuck out, the one that Travis Goodspeed puts out, I wrote an article about spool pins and how Jerry advocated actually scoring the inside of your plug walls to make them jam up even harder. Speaking of that, some companies have really done micro machining, and there's a Swedish company, Assa. Assa loves to make this crazy ass pin, which Hanfei, our friend from Holland, calls the sneaky pin. It's basically a double spool, but look at the plug. The plug has little counter-milled notches right at the top of its chambers that cause positive lockup. This is the old ASA 700. It's an old lock. I think there's what, like 4 or 5 people in the world that might be crazy or drunk enough to pick this. Like Artermeister probably would try. And then he would yell and throw it and talk to Marina. But like, yeah, like it's possible to do really interesting things just with your basic pin tumbler design. It's going to cost a lot more, because that's a question we get a lot too. People say, oh, those imperfections, well, couldn't you just make the lock, more precise? Yeah. You couldn't sell it at Home Depot for $10. There's a difference between a CAD diagram and a piece of metal in your hand. Anybody can make a CAD diagram and be like, I'm Bob's Lock Company and I'm going to make locks. Then you call the factory and you say, hello, I want to make locks. And they say, wait,
No,
and
you
say,
forgot.
oh, I need someone who speaks Mandarin.
You forgot the part that you start a Kickstarter first.
Yeah, you start a Kickstarter to make locks, exactly.
Right.
Better than Lockpicks. But yeah, like you're going to be on the phone with somebody at a factory that's going to say, well, what are your machining tolerances? How precise is this engineering? And if you want them, I want them down to like, the 10 microns. And they're like, okay, we can do that. Your supply part cost is $500. And you're like, wow, I'm trying to sell these for $4.99 on the corner bodega. So that's why all this happens. It's a trade-off of cost and engineering. And how often do we encounter spool, like in the US, what would you guys say? Like maybe half the locks you encounter in a commercial environment might have a spool in what, like
Much less than that.
Yeah. Oh, residential, you're not getting spools except for 1 or 2 like nice brands.
And it opens up the lock.
Yost has a really screwed up look on his face right now because he's like, seriously?
What are the locks like in Holland?
The reason we say that is because, Yost, what would you say in the EU, what percentage of locks, even the cheap ones that you buy at, like Castorama or something, how many of those have spool pins?
Well, if you go to the equivalent of, let's say, Home Depot in the Netherlands, well, the lower shelf maybe not. That's about it. And
But everything else is going to have spool pins.
Yeah. I mean, if you buy them at, I don't know, less than a $5, then there's a chance they won't have a spool pin. That's about it.
And there's an important point here too, is that not everybody needs super high security locks. Yet generally when you go to more populated areas like the EU, the several urban areas in the US, the cities, you're going to find higher security locks just by nature of the need for more security. And the same thing applies in the cybersecurity world as well.
We're just a much more secure country. We don't need all those crazy spool pins. That's
We
what the
have
NSA
guns.
told me.
Europe doesn't.
NSA told me that you don't need spool pins. Don't worry. It's okay.
You have guns.
We're here to protect you.
It's also important to say that even though these layers have been added to the lock to prevent you from opening them, they do not prevent against all types of attacks when you talk, holistically about security and locks in general. There are many other attacks that even the most precisely manufactured locks that may be very, very, very hard to pick open will be vulnerable to other attacks like bumping, which we'll slightly touch on in a little bit. So if you're talking about security, again, in the holistic sense, we're talking about specific areas or specific types of vulnerabilities.
Yeah. So Doug Farr with an excellent intro. Thank you, Doug. No, don't forget that. That's the important part. All right. So there's another topic now. This is not so much about opening locks. Well, I guess in a way it is. In a bit. So there's an interesting ethical discussion that it kind of never really happened across a lot of groups and across a lot other than a few posts on a mailing list. The topic of love picking is something we wanted to bat around for a minute and then even get your feedback and talk about, especially in a city like New York. So I don't know how familiar people are in this room with the idea of love locks, this notion that it was originally in an Italian film, like this bad romance movie, where a young couple puts a lock on a bridge and, they throw the key away. And because of this film, this phenomenon has grown. It started to spread originally through parts of Europe, and then it became really popular around other places.
Raise your hand if you've seen this in person.
Like, how many people have seen,
maybe
not this?
It's reasonably popular.
So this has become a huge cultural phenomenon, and it's become a phenomenon here, even in the US.
How much does that fence weigh right now?
Yeah.
It's a problem. The bridge wasn't designed to carry that many locks and people at the same time.
Yeah, so like things like this happen.
To me, that looks like a lot of free locks.
Well, that's part of what
that's
we're
part
That's
talking
part of the
this
discussion, basically.
That's my view.
So these are a lot of us who love locks, who enjoy them, I should say, who enjoy locks in general, think love locks are beautiful. We think it's a cool sentiment. We think it looks gorgeous. Like Skylar, he's a fanatic for love locks. He has all these great photos, but municipalities do not agree. So cities actually consider this a maintenance problem. They consider it a public nuisance. Here in New York and other places, especially, they just have crews that go around and cut these locks off of bridges very regularly. And if you walk across the Williamsburg Bridge or the Brooklyn Bridge, you'll see like shackles that are kind of thrown around because they're trying to collect all these locks and there are these droppings that occur. So there's become a new movement called love picking. And the idea, it's very mixed. So some people are just non-romantics and they just want to, open locks and be like, oh, screw you, lovers. And other people are very territorial.
They've had their hearts broken.
So like Sean Nichols and the Irish Cats in Love Lock No More in Dublin, the Halfpenny Bridge, they pick just to like clean their bridge. They think it's a public space issue. And other, like in Tool, we skirt the middle ground. We pick some locks, or we did until there was a big boardroom Skype call where people were upset. And we did it to preserve the locks because we thought they were gorgeous and thought it was a shame they were being thrown away.
There's two core philosophies here that are at odds with each other, and this is where we'd like your opinion in the audience. On one hand, you have from the lockpicker's perspective, look at all these great and sometimes really beautiful locks that are just going to be cut, right? So this is a maintenance issue. The cities are cutting them. Wouldn't it be nice if instead we save these locks by picking them and then reusing them in perhaps another art installation or something like that? The other perspective, the other side of this is, well, you don't own those locks. Those locks don't belong to you. And even though they've been abandoned, it is not your charge to pick them open and take them off. You shouldn't be the person doing that.
Rule number one applies.
Right, exactly. Don't pick locks you don't own. And that's an honorable and worthy rule as well. So again, these two sides are at odds with each other because at the end of the day, the locks are going to go. They're either going to be cut or they're going to be picked, or the original owners are going to come back and, if they still have the key for some reason, maybe they found the key on the bottom of the river, they open it again or for some reason. But this is the question at hand right now.
Yeah, like look at these. These are just a small sampling of the locks that Tool has preserved and some of our friends have preserved over the years. These all would have been thrown away. These all would have been in a dumpster, and instead each one of them has been wrapped in basically red felt and put in the Tool office, waiting for the culmination of a project that we'll tell you about in a minute. Before we tell you about that project, Ray is going to tell you about an interesting project for 2 or 3 slides here.
Yeah, and I had the problem but I wanted to give a love lock to a friend of mine who got married, and I didn't want to. We can change to here. Wanted to rely on the moral discussion of the people coming to the bridge with the lock hangs. So I thought, let's look inside the mechanism. I'll go back to the slide. The slide is not there.
One more time, press it.
No, we lost the screen for a second. Let's see.
Deviant lost the screen.
Drink.
Okay, the first thing I realized is that.
There we go.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so the plug and the mechanical part of the lock which operates the shackle are divided by a space, and there are 2 interacting parts. So I thought I can just saw them off and put a spacer between. So in this lock here.
Yeah. So do you guys see that plug no longer operates the operating cylinder at all now? Like, it's completely divorced.
Cam has been disconnected.
Yeah, the cam is disconnected. So this looks like a real lock.
Yeah, and you can easily engrave them with a laser cutter. So I basically engraved the lock. This is here for the conference, but the other one I engraved, of course, with the names of the couple. And detached the plug from the upper part. So you can pick the lock as often as you want, but it won't open the lock anymore. So I don't have to care about the moral issues of the people coming to the bridge. And if you want to try, I'll actually put one of these locks somewhere here at the conference, I think near the lockpicking area. I think it can be opened by manipulating somehow my returning disk, but have a look at it. Have fun.
Right. So very cool, the super love lock, apparently. But so people asked us when we were on the Brooklyn Bridge and other bridges, people asked us a lot. They said, "Hey, what are you out here?" Because there's a real. How many people, if you like to love logging, you saw someone picking it, you might be like, "Hey, what are you doing? That's my representation of forever and poetry and birds," you know. So
Well, no, there's a lot of people laughing, but I do feel that there's probably a very significant number of people who feel just as strongly.
yeah, I'm not trying to dismiss. I'm a romantic at heart, you know.
And you have to remember, every time you pick a love log, the couple gets divorced.
That's the reason.
Some people are
I
more
hope you knew
sentimental
that.
than others.
So when people asked us, why are you doing this? Why? And we would explain, you realize if we don't cut these off, like the city of New York, the Port Authority is going to cut these off. They're going to throw them away. And they said, well, why is it any better that you're picking them? Well, Moscow, Russia has started something, and I don't know of it in any other cities yet. We've reached out, that is to say, I've reached out to the press and public relations offices of the New York Department of Transportation and Port Authority, not getting any response. But we love the idea of this, of lovelock trees. So a bridge in Moscow was very weighted with locks, and it was a problem. And they had a public, installation of art. They had a metal worker make this gorgeous metal tree, and they installed it right on the foot of the bridge. And they encouraged people to put their locks on the tree instead. And they said, look, you can put them on the bridge. Like, we might ticket you if we see you, which is currently in New York. You can get in trouble for putting them on the bridge. But they said, if you put them on the bridge, ticket or not, they're going to get cut off. They're going to get thrown away. If you put them on the tree, it lives there forever. And I think that is gorgeous. It's to our mission. If there's anybody out there who has any pull, we got journalists here. It's a great human interest story. Come on. Get someone on the phone from the Bridge Commission or from, New York Department of whomever. We will raise funds for this. We will work with public metal workers for this and the steel workers and the artisans. We want to see, literally a tree rusts in Brooklyn. That's what we want to see. We want to see a lovelock tree. And if one of these gets erected, all the locks we picked, we're going to put on the tree kind of as starter locks, and other people will see it. And hopefully, I think it's freaking beautiful. But other than that, the idea of whether it's ethical, lovelocks keep spreading. Yep. And I don't know how the trend ends. I don't know what cities are going to do. And I don't know what people think is right and wrong. But there's got to be a key to solving this issue.
Key.
And I'd like to hear from the panel.
Yeah,
I'd like to hear from you guys.
Yeah, Jeff, I totally agree
go to Jos.
on the beauty of that tree. I mean, that's a very good alternative. But that doesn't mean we're allowed to pick the locks that are on the bridge. That's my opinion. I mean, the Dutch chapter is a bit more strict on this one. We see it as the same as taking a lock from a bridge, a love lock from a bridge. It equals to stealing coins from a wishing well, and it's metal, and somebody put that in there with some significance in their point of view, and we're taking it away. And yes, the locks will be taken away eventually, anyhow, even without us doing it. But now we're not, because the ground rules of picking start with: do not pick a lock that you don't owe, or have specific permission from the owner of picking it. And the question is the bridge owner the owner of the lock that happens to be on that bridge? So I think the potential media shitstorm that we're undoing some holy bond between two people, I don't want that. So I'm quite against it.
Yeah.
Sorry, there's questions.
Oh, yeah.
You
Is
said-
the crowd mic working?
I don't
We'll
know if
repeat
that's
your
on.
question if it's not.
Okay, so you said that you were reaching out to the city about this. I mean, what if you guys reached out to cities to say, let's cooperate, let's make this a thing? You're going to cut them off anyway. Let's make it a thing and make it publicly known that instead of cutting them off, people will lockpick them, and they will either get lockpicked or they will get so it's a known thing, and it's within the realm of permission.
It's a shallow line.
What's the difference between picking it or cutting it off if everybody knows that you have permission to do so?
Oh, I'm not going to cut them off.
No,
That's
you're
the
not going to cut
difference.
them
No,
off.
I'm
but
not gonna cut them
The
off.
city is going to cut them
Sure,
off.
they can do that.
So
I think-
if you get, if you're already cooperating with the city. So,
Right.
like, instead of you guys cutting them off, let us go and pick them for you.
No,
As a service to the city.
I
Look at
think
how
that-
we're saving the city money.
I think that's a far-fetched idea that any city would align themselves with a hacking organization.
It's a beautiful idea.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. And
We're a hacking organization that works with many government organizations.
there was an example of a town in, I think, California that published a hackathon in Oakland, in their
Oakland, yeah.
weekly newsletter, saying, "Come learn how to pick locks." And the media backlash of the city aligning with an organization that was teaching lockpicking was just unbelievable.
All right, well, look, here's some more backstory on that, because I think
we can talk
it
about it for a
deserves some
second.
framing. We can talk about this for a second, because Tool was the organization that was affected by this directly. So in the city of Oakland, California, which, as you guys know, has a very, very low crime rate, and is known for its safety. There's some workshop weekends. They do a lot of sciencey, hacky stuff to share knowledge and kind of encourage the idea of learning and stuff like that.
Everything from learn to solder to like baking in
all
the
sorts
kitchen.
of stuff, biohacking and this and that. And one of the workshops that our San Francisco chapter was doing was about lockpicking, which is cool, right? Now, the mayor had a newsletter, her office rather, had a newsletter that promotes local community events.
Just stuff going on in Oakland.
Stuff going
really
on in
pasted
Oakland.
with a lot
Right.
of mismatched font.
Right.
Just copy paste.
Now, imagine you're just looking for cool stuff going on in your city to post in the newsletter, and someone in the office saw, oh, cool, lockpicking. Yeah, that's cool. We'll put that in the newsletter. So then all the residents in the city of Oakland received this newsletter that said, hey, residents of this city that is having so many problems with crime, please come learn how to pick locks. And I think, as you can imagine, there was concern in the community. The act of learning how to pick locks by itself, of course, does not make you a criminal, but it was a sensitive issue, and perhaps it wasn't dealt with in the newsletter in the most politically correct way, I guess is a good way of putting it. And so that resulted in some.
That resulted in
issues.
local press, which then resulted in regional press, which is Bay Area. And I don't know if anyone came in from the West Coast, but what is the what is like the number 3 priority of the San Francisco press? Pissing all over Oakland and saying how much better San Francisco is. So yeah, it was what was that Dick Chip or Skip, whatever somebody in the San Francisco Chronicle made a huge, hit piece about it and how Mayor Jean Quan doesn't know what she's doing, and it turned into this massive, oh my God, I can't believe the crimes, the terrors.
For like a day.
Yeah, for like a day, and then it
people
died
got
out.
bored.
So the idea of lockpicking as a topic in general really fans a lot of flames it gets people very impassioned. And it happens with love locks, it happens with workshops. How many of you go home from a HackerCon and you say, oh, I bought a set of lockpicks, I could, my brother or sister, let me teach young Timmy. And they're like, hey, what are you teaching my child? It's a very hot topic issue. So yeah, I mean, we heard from Jos, our view on it was that these are abandoned property. That's how we told ourselves, maybe we were not being honest with ourselves, if you want to be critical of us. We told ourselves that it wasn't violating the law of don't pick locks you don't own, because we said, well, what if it's like these are locks like no one owns. They're just abandoned property. So I don't know if that's a stretch. I would really like to hear more from what people think. And is that a hand there? Or, yeah, go ahead, sir.
Use the mic.
Mike.
We'll repeat too. Go ahead.
Like, when people fish, they'll have like catch and release. Have you ever thought of just picking the lock and then putting it back? To maintain the symbolism.
Catch and release.
Yeah,
Well, there's a problem with that. I mean, if you're halfway picking, you're picking. So if people question you then, I know there's a story about ethics. That's a story that did not happen. Let's start off with that. It was a thought process that Skylar explained me once that made perfectly sense. Imagine you're driving along to an interstate or whatever it's called here, and it's dark and it's late, and you end up, you pass a store that is closed. You have money, you want a soda. You see the soda behind the locked door. You have the money. So I'll just pick this door open and exchange the soda for money and pick the door closed again. With all the best intentions in the world, I wouldn't go there.
Yeah. That's a cool analogy, yeah.
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 So maybe we can do an informal poll. I mean, this is not a proper sample because we have probably a very skewed
Yeah.
sample here of the populace, I would say, in a good way.
Very
But
ethical people here.
I think so.
Yeah.
I do.
So you don't have to if you don't want to, but if you think that we should stick to the Netherlands original rule book and say, you know what, you don't own the lock, it's not your lock, you didn't put it there, don't pick it. Even if someone else is going to cut it, don't pick it. Who
Show
thinks
of hands.
that's the way we should be operating?
Right?
Stick to
That's
the Dutch.
that's a significant portion. Okay.
And how about maybe the furthest to the other end of the spectrum, where we deluded ourselves a bit, saying this is abandoned property, and if we're doing it for an ethical reason to preserve them, it's okay to pick them. Anybody? That's
It's about the same,
a
actually.
little more
Yeah.
there, I'd
Yeah.
like to think, but you know.
I think the middle way would be, and that's very elaborate, is if somebody would come up to me and said, me and my girlfriend, or me and my boyfriend, whatever, we have a lock that's on that bridge.
Yeah.
We know it's going to cut. Please join me to opening.
I
that
thought you were going to
reserve."
say we broke up, so can you help me?
Miss.
And Miss, you have a question as well,
Please.
or a comment?
Yeah, so my comment is that picking a lock that somebody else has put there is kind of like cutting off a bike from where it's been connected. Not that I have any judgment one way or the other, because that could be an abandoned bike. But people might come back for their lock.
Yeah.
They might do it symbolically and then come back a year
Right.
later and,
Oh, yeah.
and want it. So there's, I have no moral connection, but I just wanted to give some.
No, that's a valid point. And we actually haven't said this publicly. Thank you, Biss. We haven't really mentioned it. After the talk we had, Tool doesn't participate in any love picking days anymore. We've been leaving the bridges alone. We are just waiting to hear back from the city and from the public, and we're really ultimately waiting for a love lock tree. That's what we really hope to find, but that's where everything stands right now. And gentlemen, yes, and then we'll move on to impressioning.
So when you get the Lovelock tree, if and when that does indeed happen, picking them from the bridge and relocating them to the tree doesn't create an ethical issue, correct?
I don't know if it does or not.
I think here's
It's an
reduces the
active
ethical
preservation, I mean. it makes
here's my thought. So I think from the perspective of the people who put the locks there, if the lock is being placed there as a symbolic gesture, then it's irrelevant if the lock can be picked or cut. That's not why you put it there, right? I mean, obviously you know that it can be cut. You know that in theory it could be picked. You place the lock there because it represents something intangible. It represents something that you can't, it's a physical representation of something that is only a thought, an idea, a feeling. And having someone pick it open, just because the lock is still physically there, the fact that it's been picked open for a lot of those people might feel that, something has been hurt or damaged in some way. And that's what we want to be sensitive to. So my personal take is, if this is something that is to succeed, this is what would have to happen. We would have to get the cooperation of a municipality. They would have to install the trees and say, like, okay, and make a big media thing out of it. These are the trees where, like, if you're a couple and you want to place a love lock somewhere, please place it on this tree, on these trees that we've created for this purpose. The bridges were not designed for this purpose. It does cause damage. It costs us money. It costs you, the taxpayer, money. Please don't do that. We're going to use the trees. And at some point in the future, on such and such a date or after such a time, we'll be removing all the locks from the bridge. Any that can be picked will be moved to the tree. Otherwise, the locks will be removed and destroyed. And if you announce that and leave like, a year of time or something like that. I think, in my opinion, that's kind of a happy middle ground. But I think the idea of just kind of back-channeling communication, going to the city saying, hey, you guys mind if we pick these locks? And they're like, sure, whatever. That gives the original owners zero time to respond and say, well, no, I don't want you to pick that. If anything, I'm going to come back and take the lock myself.
Well, at the risk of being insensitive, I just want to ask, are we really to the point where sentiment is more important than wasting a huge amount of resources, regardless of
Yes,
the
we do that all the
situation we're in?
time.
But
All the time.
okay, well, I guess I'm a realist. But
Libertarians. Oh.
Just one more point from my view. I'm from Germany, and we have a beautiful bridge over the river Rhine in Cologne with hundreds of thousands of locksmiths. Well, it's a security issue. They have to go because the bridge is used by trains, and they have tripled the way.
Yes,
meanwhile.
it's a real problem.
And it's
absolutely.
a real thing, and
Yeah,
they
true,
have
but
to
it's
go.
not
And
something that
from-
a sports group should
sorry.
solve.
And I think they have to go. And if somebody decides they have to go for security reasons, in my opinion, it's better than one of you guys or a couple of you guys go there and take the locks away, instead of the fire brigade or somebody else who cuts them away.
Thank you. As a hobbyist sports lockpicker, some of us still feel that the city is not able to give that permission for us to open that lock. It would have to be the person who put the lock on, regardless of whether they were allowed to put that lock there. We as hobbyist lockpickers have a code of ethics that we follow very strictly, and some of us don't feel like we're allowed to open that lock for any reason.
Okay,
I like that.
I would like to ask Jagor and Jos something. What if a municipality came and said, we're going to hire, not us, what if they hire a locksmith to remove the locks non-destructively? Would they be allowed to do that?
They're not bound by our code of ethics.
Okay.
I mean, if the
What
police
if-
ask you to open up a door because some criminals are
Okay.
in, that's valid, yeah.
What if some people within the organization were hired at zero charge by the locksmith temporarily as in a professional capacity, as an official employee on paper,
temporary
and then that
apprentice?
company was contracted by the city to remove the locks?
That's frowned upon. If you're wearing a tool shirt, or
Yeah, it sounds like you're not acting as a hobbyist lockpicker at that point. You're
Okay.
becoming
That's
a
true.
temporary
Yeah.
locksmith, I would
Okay,
say.
all right. So
It's-
maybe that's
it's-
part of where the line is whether you're acting as a
definitely
hobbyist
gray.
lockpicker.
It's gray.
It's gray,
Yeah.
sure, but we're trying to figure out where that line is.
I don't like gray in this area. So that's, ethics shouldn't be gray.
Well, that's
That's
just the nature of ethics.
Well,
But it shouldn't
the
be.
debate about ethics should always be gray, and then eventually you decide where you stand.
Let's take one final comment.
One final comment,
and then
we're gonna,
we'll
Yost is gonna-
go on
we're
to the
still
next
dropping
topic.
real knowledge on you in a
Yeah,
second.
yeah, we
Yost
just
is gonna
wanted to
do some
segue to
impression.
this. We're not going to use up the rest of the time with this topic. Please
Yes,
go ahead.
you, sir.
Hi. What if I lock myself to a bridge? Would you have to ask my permission to, or pick the lock without my permission? You know.
What if you locked yourself to a bridge?
all right, next question.
Then the police will come and delicately and politely swab mace in your eyes until you move. And the National Lawyers Guild will have the green hats, and they'll be documenting the whole thing to make sure your rights are protected while your eyes are burning. Jesus. Yeah. So by the way, like, just we're gonna do impressioning, which is a totally different technique, and Yost is gonna speak about that. I don't think this was incredibly rewarding, at least for us up here. We don't get to debate this. We don't get to have all these voices that normally we wish we had when we were just sitting around in bars. So thank you so much for indulging us on that. And we're gonna pepper in some other little fun stuff, but now it's like it's hard knowledge time too.
Do we want to wait? Do we want to give 10 minutes to the audience?
I think we can get through this, and then it's gonna be the 10-minute break. That's
Okay.
what the plan is. Is that all right? Your bladders are holding out. You still have filled drinks.
I see
Still
some
want to
thumbs
learn?
up. Good. All right.
All right.
Let's
Yo,
get some
stay
real,
away.
real knowledge.
I'll try to. Is this word? Oh,
Well, they can adjust the volume. If you start talking, they'll adjust the volume.
You can talk from here. Whatever.
I'm talking from here. That's okay. If you don't mind.
Oh, damn it.
Hello.
What's happening?
There you go. I didn't do nothing. Is that me?
You got it? Click forward.
Yeah,
there you go.
There you go. Impressioning. You start off, impressioning is opening a lock, because that's what we do. We're sports lockpickers. And instead of starting with nothing, with thin air and a couple of tools, we start off with something that looks like a key. But as you see, it's an uncut key. It's a key like you would see at the wall of a locksmith. So it's not cut to code yet.
It's a blank key.
It's a blank. And it should, at the end, look like this, because we all know this, well, if that's correct code, this will open your lock. So the idea is how to get from this to this. Okay, we use the same flaws in the lock that we use for lockpicking, but we use them the other way around. Let me explain. If you put a blank key in the lock, it won't open the lock. Because the same as with, the same as with lockpicking, if you turn the key, then if you're picking, then blue stuff is in the way and now the red ones are, so because now there's a hunk of metal in the middle. And if you turn it, same as in lockpicking, one or two of the pins, mostly one, will start to bind. That will be crushed to the side, and other ones will move freely. And because a key always has tolerances in your lock, and it has to have, because if there was no tolerance between your lock and your key, it would be almost impossible to get the key in, especially after a couple of drinks. That would be a problem. So what you can do if you put this key in is wiggle it a bit. I mean, if you put it in, you can move it just a tiny bit. Now, if you turn that key ever so slightly, because I mean you can't turn it, but if you try to turn it and move it up and down, in this case, this pin stack is binding, so the other ones aren't. If you move that key up and down, you will see that all these pin stacks, all they're moving up is spring pressure. So you're only pushing up the spring. And that one pin that's not, it has more pressure because it's stuck to the side. And of course, being a key, you can turn it the other side, and with any luck, that would happen on another pin stack also.
Yeah.
Now what happens, you have
Can you guys see? It's hard to read. They can't read their little black part. I don't know. Can you? Anyone in the front? Can you see the yellow? It says bind.
It says bind. This says rub.
Rub.
So basically, this is a piece of metal that's pushing against another piece of metal. At this point and this point, there's more pressure than the other ones. Do we get that?
You guys see why it's multiple pins? It's turned one way and wiggle, then turn the other way and wiggle, because you get different pins binding.
With some luck. I mean, could be the same, but I mean, ideally you have two spots. Well, because there's metal pushing into metal, with some luck, you'll end up with ever so tiny, dense scratches, markings on your blank. With the proper magnification and some training, you learn to interpret those marks. What you can do, what you know by then, is that if there's a mark, that pin didn't want to, was not springy, so it was not at the correct level. So, and because we started off with a fresh blank key, it was too high. So what we can do is, at that point and that point, where the tiny marks are, take a bit of metal off, get one step deeper. It's still not a working key, so we rinse and repeat. We put the key in, we turn to the left, rub, rub, we turn to the right, wiggle, wiggle. And so that one is still binding, so it'll make a mark. That one is still binding, so it will make a mark. So we get, in the valleys we just created, our new marks. So
how many people can see the tiny black marks on the key? You can see it?
Tiny.
Okay, good, good, good.
Okay, well, they're there. And this is actually quite correct, because normally if you have a mark on a key, you don't see it from that far off. You need some magnification and some light and whatever. And we'll have a video of that later. And so what you do, because there's markings still not the correct depth, so there and there, so we take off more material. This could go on for hours. So now we rinse and repeat again. We put it in the lock and start wiggling. But, oh, wait a minute. At position 4, that one is no longer binding. Because this pin stack is on the correct height. So if you turn it now, this one will probably still bind to the other ones. But instead of this one, with any luck, a new pin stack will be the one that's binding first.
Do you guys get it? Like, it's not binding, so it shouldn't mark, it shouldn't rub, there shouldn't be anything on the blade of the key.
So this is a combination of exploiting two properties of pin tumbler locks. One is the tolerance issue in the chambers that allows pins to bind in the first place. That's how we pick locks, right? And on top of that, on top of the existing vulnerability, there's the fact that the key, when it goes into the lock, has some slop, right? The key has to be slightly smaller than the keyway that it fits into, just to make sure that you always can insert it and remove it.
You don't stick a key in and it's not like every time you stick a key
Right.
in, it's got a little bit of room.
So you're binding the pins, so now the pins are not moving as much, and just that little bit of slop in the key, when you push it up and down, that's what's making the marks that Jos is talking about.
And a typical key blank works for this. Just make that clear. This isn't, we don't need specific keys designed for this process.
Actually, we tried a whole bunch of very specific keys. Don't go there. Because the normal factory blank seems to be the best material for this. So regular brass, that's good. We tried aluminum, we tried steel, we tried several plastics. Maybe there's a magic unicorn out there, but we haven't found them yet.
Yeah, I mean, we run training classes, and invariably, one of our students, Bobak and I, will have a student that'll either ask one of two things. They'll say, couldn't you make the keys much softer? Because the marks would be so much easier to see.
Who sees the problem with softer keys?
Then another student says, couldn't you make the keys much harder? Because I keep breaking my keys. And like, it's a completely double-edged sword. The whole thing, by the way, about the super light turning pressure, throw that out the window. This is a process of really hard torque pressure.
Yeah,
it's
finding the correct torque that will not break your key if you apply it over and over and over. And of course, if you get better at it, you can do it in less steps. So you can use more force. Because it won't break that hard.
Your coupling is in the slides.
Yeah, I mean, if you have hours and hours to do this, you can do it easy and easy and easy. But if you do this in competition, there is that fine line between too much pressure and too less. Because if you use too much, it'll break. If you use too less, it probably won't mark. And so more pressure will probably give better marks, but it will break earlier. So it's a choose.
I want to just stress that this technique of basically manufacturing a key for a lock that will open the lock without first having access to the original is very much a technique that anyone here could start doing at home, on their own without any advanced instruction. And that's kind of the theme of some of the stuff we've been talking about here, is that the barrier to entry is very low. So.
Yeah, the key part is interpreting pressure points and filing neatly. So you have, two markings on another spot, and so they have to go there and there. Well, there's no one left anymore, because that's the correct height. That's gone. And there's a new one there instead of this one. So then we file that one. And you can rinse and repeat and repeat and repeat until you come up with a working key. And that's the process.
So you guys get this, right? There's no picks involved whatsoever.
Actually, in competition, that's very much not involved.
You're only walking up to the door with a key and eventually making a working, freaking powerful attack.
Yeah, especially if you're in a red team operation or something like that, and you get stopped, you're carrying a key, man.
The key maker in the Matrix is just really good at impressioning. That's how he does it.
We have to apologize for bringing up the second and third Matrix movies. But
it wasn't that bad.
Okay, so the problem is interpreting spots, interpreting, reading the marks, and then it is filing. So, there's a mark here. Anyone can spot it? It's not the best
If
video.
you count from the shoulder as position 1, 2, all the way out to the tip,
1, 2,
shout
3,
it out which
4,
position
5.
is the mark.
That's correct, it's 2. There's more people on the front that see that in the back. That kind of makes sense. There it is. And who's that then?
Who's that awesome guy?
I have no idea. And the other one is you're using quite some force on the key. I will advise against doing that with just your bare hands. I mean, I'm pretty sure some people are able to do that, but not in competition. I mean, if you're properly training for competition, you'll ruin several boxes of blanks on a weekend. If you do that with your bare hands, good luck with that next round. That's not going to happen. So this is a commercially available grip that's especially designed for impressioning. It even says so. If you get the proper slide, you can see that. And but I had a tool maker in the Netherlands, being Jort Knaap, make this for me. Well, first of all, it's bling, so that's points.
It's bling.
It's bling.
Bling.
And it has this, lever, what would you call this?
Yeah, lever.
It's a lever? Yeah, it's a post that enables you to turn it easier.
That's all just for torque. He wants to put serious torque without hurting his wrist.
Yeah, and not just, without hurting my wrist, that's the key part. Because what you normally do, you grip that grip and turn it quite forcefully, and then kind of subtly move it up and down. So you're gripping quite hard, turning it quite hard, and then doing subtle things. That's going to hurt. If you do boxes at a time of blanks, that will hurt. If you do it like this, you can just turn it at that lever and then be gentle. So you turn it with your left hand and wiggle it with your right, and that feels way more natural.
Sounds so bad.
That's what she said.
She did say that, actually. And the fun part is you have more control also, because it's not that crampy and you move it up and down. You basically put that attack into several stages, so that's good. I really like this. The other one, the tip is, file straight, because if it's not dead on the correct angle, then maybe you will open the lock, but it will only turn one way.
Yeah.
I mean,
and the analogy I love is if you stay up too late at night and you watch like ESPN 9 or whatever that has professional pool players, a really good pool player, like any drunk asshole in a bar can we're gonna make this shot, and you can make the shot. A professional pool player isn't thinking about this shot. They're thinking about the next shot and where their cue ball is gonna land on the table. A really good impressioner isn't just thinking, my file is removing metal. They're thinking about setting up the key for the next pass of marks and observation. So they want to leave a really clean, flat surface.
Yes, it has to be clean and flat ideally, because, in the same plane. It doesn't have to be shiny. Imagine a field freshly plowed, is that the term? Freshly mowed, whatever.
Well, you could plow a field or mow it depending on what you're going for.
Plowed.
No, that's not an innuendo. I'm talking about farming. Jesus Christ.
Plowed it is. A freshly plowed field is definitely not flat. You see ridges. But if somebody would have walked through that field, you would have seen that, right?
Yeah,
so it doesn't have to be like a billiard, very flat, but it has to be consistent. So even, and actually sometimes that's better, because if it's very blingy, so very shiny. What? Sorry.
Bling is 7 years old.
Not in Europe, it isn't. So if it's very reflected, whatever, if you put a light on it to actually see something and have some magnification, then you're blind. And that's not useful in competition. Or anyhow. And other spacing is critical, because if you're filing and you're filing a bit off, your valley will not be at the correct point. So it's key to consistently file and file neatly. It doesn't mean you have to be fast. You'll get fast later. Just open it at the first time, which is an awesome feeling. I just cut down a cylinder here, so any markings that do appear have to be dead smack in the middle of these circles. Otherwise, there's something wrong, because that's where the pins were going to be. So if I see a mark, and I'm not sure if is that really a mark. Did I do that? Is that a wrong filing? Is that God knows what? If I put it in this jig thingy, if the mark is not dead smack in the middle of that circle, I know I can ignore it. So that's very useful. And okay. So if you start off, it's quite handy to know where the markings will appear. of course, this tool will help, but if you don't have that, on this you can't really see it. It's a blank key, unmodified, whatever. And what the American tool guys came up with is start off with a one-cut file, with a one-cut blank. So this is a factory cut, I reckon.
Yeah, we ran it through the ultra code. We just put the code
It's
of
actually,
1111
technically, it's a
0000.
zero-cut key. And you might say, well, that sounds stupid. It's clearly cut. What do you mean it's a zero cut? Well, the blank from the factory is actually slightly higher than zero, or which is no cut. So even telling an electronic code cutter, this position should not be cut, as it moves across the key, it will still create, it'll remove a very slight bit of metal, just a fraction of an inch of metal off the top of the key, which is perfect for this use.
There you go.
Okay, so, and, well, magnification does help, of course, because sometimes they're very tiny. What also helps is good lighting. And so we're selling these. These are quite good. And, well...
Yeah, we're okay.
Yeah, we'll skip that.
We're okay.
Well, because you have to know how deep you file. What I normally teach is try to file consistent. If you see me filing, it's 2 strokes and I'm down 1 step. If you're 8 strokes and you're down 1 step, that doesn't matter as long as it's always 8. So
Right, because key depth cuts, they don't exist on an infinite continuum. Manufacturers have very specific cut depths for every possible position. What you're seeing is a sliding gauge. You'd lock the key into the gauge, you could see if you're on a position or not. What Joost did, he has this gorgeous caliper, the Kruppelin, right? And the markings, tell him about the markings. Yeah.
Yeah, this Kruppelin, these markings are for an Abus C30 something. That's exactly the type of locks we use in European competitions. And so if you look at my Kruppelin now, it has a bunch more lines on it because, well, Schleek should be on there as well because I do compete in American competition. Or I get a new Kruppelin, but, well, lazy bastard, you know. So, well, this helps a lot. And then you open it, and well, in the end it looks like this. It looks maybe a bit funky because it's all round. We prefer to use round files, but it's a working key. It's perfect.
And like that's so, at that point, it's not like picking where, oh, I picked the lock and it's open once. If you impression a lock, even though it might take a little longer, you own that lock. Like you own that lock forever. And it's really amazingly powerful how you can use this attack. And we can talk about it all day, but then we're going to show you this really badass video, maybe even with sound, with the man over here looking all baller.
Should we wait?
I think this is going to wrap it right here.
How do I start this?
It should start automatically.
No, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't. Let me see.
Okay, you do that.
Click and... Huh? Oh, come on.
There you go, there you go, there you go. This is the final round, I believe, in German competition.
So the round just started. This video is not cut.
Yeah.
It's
They're
not
marking
sped
it,
up in
yeah, they're
any way.
spacing their keys. You used your gauge.
Yes.
Arthur used a stamp tool.
Yeah, he used a new tool that he had made, yeah. So
And you can see right up here.
This is the first time I touched the lock.
That's him right there. So you'll see that turn and wiggle right there in the middle.
Turn, wiggle. It's kind of
So
fast,
he's
but
not
it's
just scraping it, he's turn and wiggle, super fast.
on that. Normally these competitions, first round takes an hour and about half of the field opens. It's not that long of a video, I can assure you. Turn, wiggle, open. I just want to say that, the good people of Abus, which make quite good locks, you see us defeated in well, not split seconds, but under a minute.
How long does it take a locksmith to copy a key?
Yeah.
That's when you hand him the original key. I mean, this is with no information about the lock other than the brand.
And we're talking security pins here are irrelevant most of the time.
Right, the blue pins you saw, they're out of the plug until Abus.
Until Abus, because Abus, they've been supplying us with free locks and blank keys for quite a number of years. and we thank them for them. And well, the positive side goes both ways, because now they come up with these evil pins.
Yeah.
This is a standard ABUS configuration.
Yeah.
This is not what we consider in Europe high security.
This is
just
the
pins.
European
Now
equivalent
it
of a
is,
Schlage.
because of
Nowadays.
us.
Yeah.
All right, so this is the equivalent of a commercial Schlage
Yeah.
deadbolt.
They were like, this
in
year
Europe.
for LockCon, they rubbed their hands and they were like, oh, here's your locks. And if you could have heard the room within like 30 seconds this year, the first round, everyone's like, oh, what the fuck is this? Like, because the marks were going away, they were coming back. It was a mess.
Meanwhile, I was oblivious. I knew that there might be something coming soon from ABUS, but I thought these were normal locks, so I'm just sitting there trying to file normally.
All right, so that was, we're getting the signal, we're getting the light, we've got to pee because we've been drinking. We're going to keep dropping more knowledge like this on you after the break. We're going to do a quick break, and please come back. I hope, are you still having fun? You're going to come back? All right.
10 minutes, please.
10-minute break.
So at 5 till.
Where is that slide?
What's that? Oh, yeah.
Hey, man. I had a brake slide in here somewhere. I don't know where it went. Hey, man. How you doing? I'm very happy about it. I can't get any feedback. Give me 1 second to go to... Yeah, man.
It's very difficult. It just might be how the lock is worn down over time, possibly. It could be the construction. It's very difficult to pick, regardless of what the reason is. It's very difficult to pick, for sure.
I don't assume it's due to very high security pins, because it's not a very famous brand for the newest technology or something. So I think it's there. And I don't know, it's true, but people, like for picks, people name things differently in different regions or where they come from. So a scroll could be the same as a spool. Yeah, but then, but if you had something like a spoon or a mushroom, you would really know it's going on a. So that's usually really the. I think that the red dots have something to do with it. But it's very true. Yeah, okay. No. Oh, the silver one.
I told him anyway. It's a beautiful construction. I love it. There was another really long one. You're playing last start on? Yeah. What number was that? T8. Yeah. That was the predecessor to this one. That one was very innovative, but it wasn't very difficult. This one is proper difficult. How many people got this one? We haven't had a lot of exposure with it yet because we've only had it for a week when we've been moving. I got it a couple days ago, but it took me several hours over the course of a couple days to do it. It's a very well constructed lock. There are certain steps that you get to that you're just very frustrated because it looks like you've done everything you can. And yeah, you'll see. I feel like while I'm trying, want some water? Yes, it's for this one.
I think I want some toilet. Whatever the next one is.
Paging Bobek. No, we just drink them all. But you know what's in this piece? Club latte with it?
No, not in this one. It's too.
Oh, that's yours.
We've been missing you at
All right. What you got? Bottles.
My God, they actually came back.
I know, we barely lost anybody.
That was your chance. That was your chance to leave.
Oh, man. All right, so we're going to talk about another fun cultural topic, and then some exploits, and then some more blah, blah, blah.
Community, yay.
Okay, so before that, I want to circle back at something I said originally about the difference between...
About why picking is better and you're wrong, and like raking.
So why raking is always the best technique. That's what he was
point.
going to talk about.
So I asked, what the difference is, or what the response would be when somebody asked you, are you training criminals, or what's the purpose of your organization? And I think the best answer to that, if you encounter that in the field, is, a criminal won't come to a meeting, I think, unless it's court ordered.
And if he does, he won't return.
Right. So I think that you're generally pretty safe. We've all been interviewed several times by press, and that it's something that continuously comes up. So
I mean, the real answer for wait, why do you guys teach people to pick locks?
Why don't you?
Because we like to. We think it's fun. We like to teach other people things that we find fun. It just so happens that the fun thing is picking locks. And there's a lot of activities that you can happen to enjoy that might sound kind of strange to some people. And they don't have to understand. They just have to, respect that, you're probably going to try to do it in a way that is, good and ethical and honest. The more a little going deeper on the topic, as Doug mentioned, is always the concern. Well, what about the criminal element? It's hard to speak with actual numbers or experience on this topic, in my opinion, because there isn't a whole lot of data that we've been able to find concrete out there. There's a few news articles here and there, but there's not a whole lot. But from my best estimation, the people here, the criminals that are seeking this knowledge with the intent of using it for harm are not going to be coming to our membership meetings with regularity, learning lockpicking from us. I feel that they would probably not want to be as exposed, and they would probably try to learn this on their own, especially because our organization is comprised of not just hobbyist lockpickers, but non-hobbyist people like professional law enforcement, people with local municipalities, people with federal agencies, people that are just teachers. It's such a diverse membership that I don't know. I feel that we've been fairly successful in being self-regulating. Never say never. It's always possible that one day I'll be proven wrong. I hope that day never comes. But so far, for all the years that we've been operating, I think we've done an excellent job of being self-regulating and weeding out people that we think maybe aren't the best fit for the community. It looks like something I said may have struck something with you.
I was just wondering, obviously, when the criminal world's are breaking locks, they're doing it on big safes on really secure systems. Do you ever get feedback from those? Because obviously they're doing what you do, but just on a
just so do we get feedback from the manufacturers, you mean?
Or from those guys. You ever get any? Not saying not you mixing those circles, but
do we get feedback from criminals or from manufacturers?
Obviously, people who are just technical.
Just feedback from technical researchers. Yeah, I mean, that's,
sure.
That's
pen
all
testing,
the time.
pen testing.
That's what we do. Testers. Yeah, that's what a lot of our jobs are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Raise your hand on the stage if you're a pen tester. A lot of us.
So, And you know, for that reason, actually, we you know, a lot of the organizations do have some unofficial lines of communications with lock manufacturers. So if they have questions, they kind of ask us in an unofficial capacity.
From
And
Abbas to Schleg.
and if we find something, you know, we have, you know, we all have contacts. We have, you know, people high up in, you know, different departments, you know, and cylinder engineers that we call, hey, you know, Jack, I don't know if you guys heard about this yet, but we found this thing with your newest lock.
Or they send us some pre-production models.
Yeah. Right.
Like, well, please try to kill these, so it's cheap R&D for them.
Yeah.
And we get to play with toys
Yeah,
that
we
don't
get to play
exist
with
yet.
cool stuff, absolutely.
Yeah.
When John King first disseminated his method of picking Medico, which is probably one of the most widely used American high security lock, used in high security applications for government, the White House. I think there's, you know, rumors that it was used to unlock the or arm the nuclear missiles. So when he released that information, he actually had, you know, several run-ins with both military and federal agents that were curious about his intention. So
Yeah, that interaction happens a lot. Render, if that's, I see a shadow, a profile.
The man
I
with the
see a
strange hat.
Yeah, I have a
See a
very
fedora.
distinctive profile here. So,
You look like the man giving testimony with his voice altered in like a Discovery Channel show.
With like a really deep
I
voice.
see a blur there.
yeah, I can neither confirm nor deny that has ever happened. No, I just wanted to point out that the other part of it, of teaching, is not just the skills, but the education. Holy crap, I just popped this lock that's the same one in my front door. Bump keying is a prime example. I was reading about it in the Complete Guide to Locks and Locksmithing, an edition that was from the early 90s. I read a technical description of bumping. So the information had been out for years before it really hit, you know, the community or anything like that. But because of LockSport, namely you guys up here, getting out, telling the message, now you're seeing manufacturers actually dealing with it. It used to be, you know, this little secret that the locksmiths kept to themselves to make their job easier. Now we actually have, you know, a raising the bar in security, because if people know, yeah, the lock that came with my house is crap, they're going to go spend money at a locksmith from these manufacturers and buy a better one.
I totally agree. That's definitely one point. So we are making the world safer.
consumer awareness is a good way to put it.
And on the other hand, we're a sports group. It's a sport. I'm pretty sure that anyone who teaches somebody else baseball won't get any lip if you teach someone how to swing a piece of wood. And that's
It all
also
depends on what the
very
target
capable.
is.
Is
Is it a ball or someone's head that's the target? The other analogy I always say is, if you have a lock in your hand that's not securing anything, not attached to anything, is it a lock? Is it a mechanical puzzle? Because what makes it a lock a lock?
That's interesting.
It's a very philosophical
It's very,
thing that
what is,
I've been drinking.
doesn't
So.
achieve lockness. It's not really. Yeah, that's,
Thank
that's a
you.
good question.
Okay, cool. So on that note, I just want to kind of briefly touch on the community organizing aspect, the different clubs and organizations, and some of the history of LockSport and how it came to be, as well as some of the challenges that we've had to deal with. And I, you know, particularly want feedback from the audience in this regard about wins that some of you may have experienced in terms of community organizing. So that's what we'll touch on.
I love that
theme.
word, community. Stick it on anything and it sounds official, right? Like if you're like, hey, let's make some fucking t-shirts. We're like, all right, whatever.
Picking
Like,
with
hey,
Bluetooth.
let's talk about the t-shirt making community. You just add the word community and it just seems so much more grand and honorable and purposeful.
So yeah, but we are a community. The real origins of the LockSport or lock obsession or lockpicking obsession in the U.S. originated, I think, you know, with the advent of the internet, like most things. The first highly disseminated piece of documentation was the MIT Guide to Lockpicking that was published in 1992.
Which is now known as the guide formerly known, the document formerly known as the MIT Guide to Lockpicking.
MIT did not want to
MIT
be
was not
associated
happy.
with that. But that was really the first and most accurate, you know, lockpicking guide that was published that anybody could access and download without paying a fee, without being part of, you know, a locksmithing, I can use that community word again. What we've found when dealing, when attempting to deal with different locksmithing organizations is a real culture of secrecy that, you know, we're trying to break down. So they view us as a threat, or they have viewed us as a threat. I'm not sure, you know, if that view on their behalf has evolved in any way. But for instance, the president and the several press releases from organizations like ALOA, which is the American Locksmithing Association,
Associated Locksmiths of America.
Associated Locksmiths of America have, you know, publicly denounced our practices and our teachings as something that, you know, shouldn't be known, right? And there's a real problem there, obviously, and you can understand why. Is if the fact that they're obfuscating this information and trying to keep it secret means that there's quite a bit of vulnerability and potential for abusing the information. So they're keeping this information under wraps, and they're doing it, you know, not only to preserve their profession, but also to preserve the secrecy of all of these vulnerabilities that are available. So that's why we like to talk about consumer advocacy or consumer education, because that's kind of the basis of what we're doing. We're showing people how easy it is to break into their own homes or to bypass, you know, certain locks, so they can make better purchasing decisions, so they can protect themselves and their family better if they choose to.
So just to play devil's advocate here, I think it's important to understand that LOA and other professional locksmithing groups, they're not trying to, this isn't some massive cover-up conspiracy or something weird like that. This is a byproduct of how the trade organization has grown over the last few hundred years, basically. How the art and craft of locksmithing has been, you know, disseminated from generation to generation. Locksmiths traditionally have always been people who are literally gatekeepers, right? These are the people that you're supposed to trust the most, and thus their knowledge was seen as something that should be protected. So for many hundreds of years, locksmiths passed down their knowledge from master to apprentice in the same way that a lot of martial arts are passed down as well. And it's done because they want to make sure that as information is spread and as this information is taught, the ethics and honor are taught alongside with it, to make sure that that knowledge is only being used for good and not for bad. And this is kind of the original genesis for why these closed circles of knowledge existed in the first place. Those types of groups are not as successful, and their purposes are not as successful in today's information age, where information can be passed so quickly. So what happens is you have a group of classically trained locksmiths, of people who have been taught their entire lives, all right, now this knowledge that I'm teaching you is sacred. This is important. You should never teach this to someone who is not a locksmith. This is something that they've all promised to. In fact, it's in the ALOA code that as a member you agree not to disseminate information to people who are not supposed to have that information. And it's done with the best intentions, right? And so from one point of view, in one respect, that's the thing that they're concerned about. This is why their gut reaction to, like, hey, we're a bunch of sport lockpickers and, you know, people talking about lockpicking on YouTube. This is why their gut reaction is, what? No. The other end of it are the people who perhaps are not particularly secure in their profession for a variety of reasons. Perhaps some people, in my opinion, who don't fully understand the reason for their profession might feel challenged, or might feel that, okay, well, this is stuff that only I'm supposed to know. If everyone knows this, then what makes me special? What makes me be able to charge what I charge? And it's not the knowledge, of course. It's the fact that, you know, it's how you execute that knowledge. It's how you provide that customer service. The people aren't paying you just for your knowledge. They're paying you for how you use that knowledge and how you deal with it. And then another thing that they've been dealing with is, especially in New York City actually, and any of you guys who are from larger metro areas, this scourge of fraudulent locksmithing. Over the years, there's been more and more problems with a lot of fake yellow page ads being taken out, from companies pretending to be locksmiths. And so what happens is, maybe 1 a.m. rolls around, you lock your keys in your car, and maybe your kid's in the car or something, or maybe you're locked out of your house. So what do? You call a locksmith. You go, hey, help, I locked myself out of the house, really need your help.
I locked myself in my car.
Right. So,
in your car?
You get a quote. You're like, all right, how much is it? They're like, oh, $60. I'm like, oh man, $60. All right, yeah, come on out. They get there. Someone in not a locksmith van shows up. They might show up in a personal vehicle or just some unmarked van.
No outfit.
No outfit, no nothing. They show up, they look at your lock, and they go, oh, you didn't tell me it's one of them high security locks. This here's a quick set. This one I won't be able to get by. This is a special rate. This is actually going to be $200. It's going to be $200 for me to open it, and I'm going to have to drill it. And so all of a sudden, what do? You're in a vulnerable position. You're like, who is this guy? I'm out in the middle, of the night, and okay, sure, $200, fine, just get me in. Now they've destroyed your lock. So now they go, oh, well, this sure is a nice house you have here. You don't want to leave it unlocked, do you?
Would be a shame.
If someone stole all your shit. So what do? They offer you, another high security quick set or easy set. Basically some crap lock for the low price of $450 plus installation. So these are people who are scammers, right? These guys aren't locksmiths, they're scam artists. And so what is one way, perhaps not the best way, to fight this? Well, you make simple possession of any locksmithing tools or the use of any locksmithing craft without a license illegal. And this is what the locksmithing lobby has been lobbying for in a lot of jurisdictions and has been successful in at least one state, the state of Tennessee.
Yeah, we'll cover that in a little bit. We'll cover laws in a bit.
Yeah, we'll cover laws in a bit. But this is another reason too. So the reason why I bring all these points up is because I want everyone to have a really good appreciation for what both sides of the conversation look like. So
and here we are trying to just organize some meetings. And
right.
We got this coming at us.
So as leaders of our various LockSport groups, our charge is not just to teach you guys cool stuff, because that's fun, but it's also to serve as a bridge between this world and the professional world, to help both sides understand each other, and hopefully we can find a way where everyone gets what they want. And I hope that gives you guys a better understanding of, why is it they're trying to squelch this knowledge, this information. It's not that they're just trying to silence us, they just don't understand us yet.
Yes, sir. Just start talking.
Yep. Question on encryption and keys. I have a relatively fair background in encryption. And
the what keys?
Encryption, digital encryption.
Yes.
So there's a big focus on making sure that the lock is secure, but encryption is actually the opposite, right? In encryption, you focus on making sure your key is secure. So how do you guys see parallels between that and sharing information around the differences?
Well, I mean...
So there's loads of parallels between the digital and physical world in terms of disclosure of vulnerabilities, learning from vulnerabilities. Obviously, key compromise, like breaking in one time versus compromising the key.
There will be a talk about that tomorrow.
I mean,
Posting pictures of keys on.
This is a perfect parallel, actually, because you phrased your question perfectly. Because you mentioned the point is to keep your keys secure. And in fact, most of the time when encryption is broken, is it because the key was stolen? No, it's the implementation. It's the implementation of the encryption. The encryption wasn't broken, the key wasn't broken, the implementation was broken.
Yeah.
And in lockpicking, you see the same thing. Most of the time when the lock is compromised, the key is not what was compromised. It was the implementation of the lock that was compromised. So in that sense, there's a great deal of parallels.
Right, because I think something like that can be used to evangelize your position a little bit better, right? If you say, look, if everybody knows how this lock works, then it's really about the security.
That's not how they've been taught. That's not how they've been
No,
raised.
I understand. I'm just saying in defense of the perspective.
Absolutely.
You can say, look, there are plenty of other areas that are secure in the world where that security is kept in wide view so that it is more secure. I need clipper chip.
Historically, it's a community based around obfuscation and secret knowledge. Yeah.
Which we all know is dated.
But now
do you have a question? As well? And then, then we'll do some history and we'll move
in
on.
the Dutch lockpicking community, we have quite a number of professional locksmiths. And, so there is change in that community also, which is good.
Yeah.
Sir.
Great. I was coming home one day from work, and my neighbor was sitting on his stoop, and I didn't recognize him, though. He said he was locked out of his place. You know, I am a lockpicker, I know how to pick locks, but I didn't feel comfortable picking the door for someone I did not know in their own place. How did a lockpicker determine legitimacy of their ownership of the property? And have you been in similar situations yourself?
Do you mind if I repeat the question?
Totally.
So the gentleman said he came home from work, he saw a neighbor kind of sitting on the stoop, and if I understood you, you sort of maybe recognized him, but didn't really recognize him.
I hadn't seen him before, and I was like, hey, how are you doing? He's like, I'm locked out of my place.
And then he said, oh, I'm locked out, and did he know that you knew how to pick locks?
No.
All right, so the ethical dilemma is, if you're a lockpicker and someone is stuck, outside of a door, what do you do? That's a big. We get this question a lot.
I don't see the ethical dilemma.
There's no ethical
dilemma. It's a no.
In my opinion, either.
Right.
You
well,
do
I
nothing.
because people ask us ethically. That's what I'm saying. I personally wouldn't.
Yeah.
Unless I have opened a lock there were two instances. One was a family member, one was a close friend. I knew them both very personally, and I knew they owned their house. They weren't rentals. And I said, hey, you understand? Like, I gave them, it's kind of that whole spiel. You're like, hey, so there's a slight chance this is going to get all fucked. Do you mind? And they're like, it's raining, I'm cold, I want to get inside. I'm like, all right, I'll see what I can do. And of course, because it's American locks, like, you're like, oh boy.
That's permission of the owner, rule number 2, done. Yeah.
And that's, of course, the main reason why we tell people, even if you now have this skill and you have this knowledge, even if a friend or a coworker calls you and says, hey man, I'm locked out, can you help me out? Your answer ideally should be no for a variety of reasons. Not because you don't want to help them, but because you are not equipped from several different standpoints to help them. You may have some skill in opening locks, but if you don't know how their lock has been designed necessarily, you don't know if it's been master keyed. If you break that lock, now you're in kind of an awkward position because you are not a locksmith, so you don't have replacement parts, you don't have bonding and licensing, you don't have insurance to cover damages that might be done, you don't have the ability to quickly order exactly the right part or maybe even the knowledge to know exactly what the right part is in the event of damage. So in that case, it's worth the $50-$60 to get a real honest-to-God locksmith to come out there.
The scammer story Bobak told is not the norm. That's when you get scammed.
Right. If you call a real locksmith, they're there to help you. That's their purpose.
Yeah. And then render, and then we gotta go on. But this is great, though. We love this. Go on. Yes.
Microphone.
I'll repeat. Oh, all right.
And I just dropped my keys.
Don't show those keys.
No, I just wanted to say that similar situations, I've opened for friends and close friends and family. But usually it's like a garage door, something. Don't care if I screw up. But just for that reason, when you get that call, I actually have a couple of locksmiths in town that I know are not crooks or anything like that. And I keep a bunch of their cards with me in my car. So I'd be like, nope, can't help you, but here's a phone number.
Absolutely.
Same here.
That's a great way, by the way, to build a relationship with your local locksmith. Make friends with them. Be like, hey, I'm into locks. By the way, my friends know I'm into locks. I'm not comfortable opening locks for them. I'm sure you as a locksmith understand. They might even give you a better price. You mind if I give your card out?
Yeah, but you have to ease them into it because when you start using all the proper industry terms for everything like that, they look at you really funny.
Yeah, they are. It takes time. But I think the analog is, we're at a security conference. Most people here know computers. I think a number of you guys have a shirt that says, I will not fix your computer. This is the... this is the real world analog of that same problem. Don't go there it's normally not. But.
Okay, let's keep moving here.
Keep it moving, yeah.
So one of the things that we've had the delight of experiencing is teaching many different types of people and children, and I know we've all, well, everyone's laughing at the children part, but actually little girls are very good at picking locks.
Little hands.
Anyways,
Little hands are best hands.
They have, well, I mean, I don't want to sound gender specific or insensitive, but actually some females are more patient and have more dexterity, and in turn they can manipulate locks. Maybe they catch on a little better.
They also generally don't have the complex of, I'm a guy, I know everything, so I'm going to open this lock instantly. So if you approach it from a standpoint of like, I'm going to learn about this and discover this thing, then you have a lot more luck.
Yeah. So anyways, what the point is that we get the opportunity to teach a lot of different people, a lot of diversity in our students. We've had situations, John and I, teaching in Austin, where we had a school a small group of deaf individuals come and really engage in our teachings and really enjoy it. You know, it was something that may not seem like a big deal, but to see these people that may usually be outcasted or discriminated against for whatever reason really engage in what we're teaching. We've had blind individuals really enjoy Excel. We've had students that brought their children, that the children was educationally disabled or may have some learning disabilities. So it's something that I can't stress enough. It's neat, and the lure to do it is very high. So the point I'm trying to make, I guess, is that it's something that you can engage somebody in that has a very high success rate, and you can really see people brighten up as they start to learn and understand what's going on in locks. So with that in mind, I just want to talk a little bit about some of the community organization that we've tried to accomplish over the years. I like to use the analogy or metaphor of kind of a fire pit or a campfire. So the issue we've had is when we're building this campfire, we have our coals, which is our former members, our kind of gurus, the people that have been involved in the lock community for a very long time, that have the knowledge. We have the fuel, which is kind of the active members, the people that keep coming back for more. And then we have our flames, which is our new members, our incoming membership, those that are just newly interested. So our issue here is that we have plenty of coals and we have plenty of fire, but the fuel is kind of missing from the equation. And to give you an example, when John and I first started hosting events in Austin, we would fill up a conference room of 60 people that would come to our first meeting, and that were just totally excited about the opportunity to learn how to do something different. And as we progressed, the second meeting would happen and there'd be 30 people. The third meeting would happen and there'd be 15 people. So we were seeing, a pretty significant decrease over time. And what would end up happening is, a specific organization or specific club in particular would basically be run by one person. And if that person stopped running the organization or lost interest or maybe even tried to pass it to somebody else, the organization would eventually would die. So while we like to brag that we have over 20 organizations around the world relating to law